Hey Heather, hey Vanessa.
Hey Alex. Hey Heather. I'm gonna make you a host, Alex. So here goes.
Thank you. I think I'm host. I can mute people now.
Yay, perfect. You can go ahead and mute me.
Okay. Muting. Heather, let us know when you come back. Yeah, I'm gonna just test out sharing the presentation real quick.
How's the sound?
Hey, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Let me go
It's
ahead and share and see if we can get this started here.
yeah, it's nice to meet you, by the way. I feel like we've been emailing back
Uh,
a bunch, but never
I
face to face.
know. It's nice to meet you too.
Thank you so much for doing this training. I know everybody is super excited, and we've got, I think Vanessa checked the other day, like 80 people have signed up, which I feel like is a pretty good
Oh,
number.
that's a lot. That is a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, I'm excited. Let me just get everything swapped around here so it makes sense to me.
Hi
Um,
Heather.
Hi.
Yeah, there was a lot of people who registered. I want to let you both know that the recording has started as well.
Okay.
Cool. And we can edit that, Vanessa, right? Because we're going to put it on the website. So we'll just
Yeah.
put out all this part of it. Yeah. Okay.
Um, just thought I'd let you know that it's recording so that you don't have to stop it or pause it or
Oh,
you can,
perfect.
yeah.
One last thing for me to do. I love it.
All right. Let me see if I can get the right thing shared here. What do you see?
Yep. That looks good.
Fantastic. We are in business. Look at us, 15 minutes to spare.
And then Heather, were you planning on doing any like Q&A at the end, or will it just be kind of the presentation?
Yeah, this presentation has about 36 slides, so
Okay,
I don't think it will take up the entire time.
cool.
My thought was hopefully the slides will lead to a discussion. And Alex, will you be helping me sort of moderate that, or how do you want to handle it?
Yeah, it's myself and then also Anissa and Erica who have been on the emails too. So I think between the three of us, like we can try to like field questions from the chat and just try to lift up anything that we're seeing. But if you want to kind of take lead on that, and then we can just kind of pipe in when need be, I think that would work.
You got it. It might be difficult for me to see the chat and raised
Yeah.
hands just because my screen, I have one full size and a laptop, so it's not ideal, but
So I'll just be on the lookout for any raised hands and then can kind of call on people or lift up questions from the chat.
wonderful. Okay, well, I'll mute out for a minute until I'll come back in. And what do you think? Like 7 minutes or so?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And then just at the beginning, I've got like I'll just tell folks like when they're coming in, that we'll get started in a couple of minutes. And then I've got like a little introduction for you as well, if that sounds good.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much, Alex. I'll see you in a few.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks,
Bye.
Heather. Heather, I forgot to mention that at the end of the training, Erica and Anissa, they put together a little survey just so that we could get some better ideas of like how the training resonated for folks and other areas that we might want to do trainings in. So once the Q&A is over, then we'll just throw that in the chat and ask folks to complete it. And then I guess maybe we'll send it out also with the slides too afterwards.
That sounds great, Alex. And so just to be clear, do you want me to sort of fill the entire hour and a half or more like an hour, hour 15? You tell me and I can sort of tailor what I do to fit your time frame.
Yeah, the whole hour and a half is for you. So
Okay.
yeah, however we want to fill it. And if we don't use the whole hour and a half, then that's okay too.
Okay.
We've got an hour and a half scheduled.
Okay. Fantastic. And I'll leave at least 5 minutes at the end for the survey.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Erica. I can't tell if you're in the way I have people pinned.
Hey Alex, hey Heather and Vanessa, how's it going?
Hi,
Good.
Erica. Well, how are you?
Luckily I'm doing good. Just trying to see. Hopefully, I was trying to hopefully log in a few minutes early to help with tech check. How's everything going so far? Smooth?
I think it's great. As long as you still all see the start of my slideshow, we're in good shape.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Great.
it's good on my end.
And Erica, I
Wonderful.
just made you a co-host so that you should have the ability to go in and mute people. And then Heather and I were just talking through kind of the flow. So I'll do just like a brief introduction and welcome folks as they're joining. And then Heather's got her whole presentation. We've got a Q&A at the end. And then if you and Anissa and I can kind of help her moderate like the chat and any like hands that come up, she won't be able to see that at the end during the Q&A. So we can just kind of pop in as we're seeing folks ask questions and raise their hands. And then Heather's going to leave about 5 minutes at the end for the survey that you put together.
Wonderful. And I'm happy to share that link in the chat since I have it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds like a good plan.
We'll just we'll give it a few minutes until we get to like 4:01 and then I'll admit everybody and we can hopefully get started then.
Sounds good.
All right.
I'm just gonna run to the restroom really quick. I'll be right back. Okay.
Rick, are you back yet? Give it another minute. You've got 14 folks in the waiting room so far.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and admit the folks in there, and then we'll give it another minute or two for additional folks to come on. Hi, everybody, welcome. We're gonna give it a couple of minutes for folks to keep joining us. But if you're here for the Public Defender Homes Not Handcuffs training, you are in the right place. So just get a glass of water, a cup of coffee, make yourself comfy, and we'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us for Homes Not Handcuffs, a public defender's perspective on ending the cycle of homelessness and incarceration in Santa Cruz County. My name's Alex Dami. I'm a senior analyst with the County of Santa Cruz, and I'm joined today with Heather Rogers, public defender, Erica Cortez, and Anissa Benuelos, who are two of our co-hosts today. Just some housekeeping to get us started. This presentation is being recorded, and we are planning on posting the recording to the Housing for Health Partnership website in the coming week or so. So if you have somebody who wanted to attend but couldn't make it today, they'll be able to view it afterwards. We'll also be sending out a copy of the slides to all the registrants after the training. During the training, if you can stay muted when not speaking, just helps reduce some of that background noise. And at the end of the presentation, we will have a bunch of time for questions and answers. So please feel free to submit any questions in the chat as they're coming up during the presentation. So with that out of the way, I would like to introduce Heather Rogers. Heather Rogers has been a public defender for over 20 years in the state and federal courts, and she's handled cases at every stage of litigation from arraignment through trial and appeal. She has represented clients accused of offenses from delinquency to homicide, defended detainees incarcerated at Guantanamo Naval Base in Guantanamo, Cuba, and argued cases in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Heather is honored to serve as the first public defender of Santa Cruz County, her birthplace and home. Before her appointment, Heather served as a public defender of Bigham, Christensen, and Misloff, the defense firm that previously provided public defense services for Santa Cruz County. Heather is also a faculty member of the National Criminal Defense College, lecturer in legal studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and a frequent trainer at regional and national trial skills programs. She also serves on the board of directors of the Housing for Health Partnership Policy Board, Community Corrections Partnership, Criminal Justice Council, Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, Santa Cruz County Trial Lawyers Association, and Santa Cruz County Defense Bar. Heather, I don't know how you have time for anything else. Heather has an AB in English Language and Literature from the University of Chicago and a JD from Stanford Law School. And she lives in Aptos Mountain with her husband and daughters. And in her free time, when she's not doing all this amazing work, Heather enjoys traveling, hiking, and snowboarding. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Heather.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex. I am so excited to be here with all of you. I see so many familiar faces and, people who have just shown such tremendous support for our clients in so many ways. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what my clients are facing out there in Santa Cruz County if they are unhoused or housing insecure, which unfortunately many of our clients are. So thank you so much for coming. Please do put your questions in the chat. I would love for this to be the start of a conversation with each of you as we work together as a community to solve this challenge, which is a really big challenge for us as a community. So I want to start by telling you something that I know you know just by your inviting me here. Homelessness and entanglement in the criminal legal system go hand in hand. And for me, a story that comes to mind when I think about that is a story that's typical, but for whatever reason, this young woman stands out in my mind, so clearly. I represented a female client here in Santa Cruz County with mental health issues. She was sexually assaulted on the streets, and she took shelter in an unoccupied home that was under construction. She was charged with felony first-degree residential burglary. The elements of that crime are pretty simple. Entry into a dwelling for the purpose of committing a felony. The prosecution's theory was she entered the partially built unoccupied home to steal utilities. And the proof was she took a shower. So first-degree residential burglary is a serious felony. It's a strike. It carries up to 6 years in prison. The elements of the crime were surely met here, right? But does it make any sense as a society in this community, Santa Cruz, to saddle this young woman with a felony? Does it make sense from an ethical standpoint, from the standpoint of policy, from the standpoint of law? And this is just one of literally hundreds of ways homelessness is criminalized in Santa Cruz County. This is an issue that really forces us to confront not just our lack of affordable housing, but also this frayed, broken safety net that folks are slipping through. We have to think super, super critically about whether the criminal legal system, which includes prosecution, incarceration, and punishment, makes sense when the root causes of system involvement involve homelessness. I so appreciate your asking me to talk about this issue, but I come in a spirit of just complete humility. I am not an expert on homelessness. I'm learning with all of you. I am a concerned community leader, dedicated to centering compassion, equity, and sound policy in the decisions that we make every day as public servants. And so today we're going to talk about the scope of homelessness and housing insecurity in our community, the laws that impact our unhoused population, and what my office, the Public Defender's Office, is doing to approach this issue in the spirit of courage, compassion, and community. And at the end of the presentation, as Alex mentioned, there will be plenty of time for questions and discussion. And I have no doubt that I am going to learn so much from each of you as we talk about some of the things that we bring up today. So homelessness in Santa Cruz County is a persistent problem. Every 2 years, communities across the country, including ours, do a head count of the local homeless population. I saw some of you out there this year doing this count with me, and I know you know the process. We literally canvass the entire community looking for folks that are unhoused, and we count them. So our last count happened on January 25th, 2024, kind of this bright, sunny, beautiful winter morning. And we went out there, and what we found was that Santa Cruz County still has one of the highest per capita rates of homelessness in the state. Our percentage of homelessness is twice as high as California's overall percentage of unhoused, and experts agree that this point in time count it really underestimates the scope of the true problem. Homelessness in Santa Cruz County is a crisis, and it affects the well-being of our community, not just unhoused people or people who are housing insecure. It affects all of us. So what the count showed was that homelessness affects people across a broad spectrum of characteristics and experiences. Of course, traditionally marginalized populations bear the brunt of homelessness, as they do so many other things. We found that the homeless population includes people of all ages, with 16% young people under the age of 25. It affects all genders and sexual orientations, with men disproportionately impacted at 64%. People of color are heavily overrepresented in the unhoused population, with over 53% identifying as non-white. 171 people in our count identified as experiencing homelessness as a family, and the count found 194 unaccompanied children and transitional age youth. So unaccompanied children means that these are people under the age of 18 who are not accompanied by a parent or a guardian. And if they have children of their own, they're not sleeping in the same place as their children. Transition age youth are people between the ages of 18 and 24 who aren't accompanied by a parent or guardian. And what we also found, which is really troubling to me, is that 16% of unhoused people were in foster care. Many people in our unhoused community are sick. 55% reported a disabling condition. 46% struggle with drug or alcohol use. 29% have a physical disability. 28% have chronic health conditions. 37% have psychiatric or emotional conditions. 33% have PTSD. 4% have an HIV or AIDS related illness, and 13% have traumatic brain injury. And this is also what we see here in our practice at the Public Defender's Office. The folks that are slipping through that frayed social safety net are people who are struggling with all of these other challenges, many of which go untreated, ignored, or even punished. There are so many false narratives and myths that surround unhoused people. In our society, we do this othering that makes it easier to adopt sort of these divisive narratives, right? These narratives that allow us to engage in discrimination against the unhoused and to think to ourselves that they're somehow outside of us, right? They're not one of us, they're something else. And one of those narratives that is just not true is that most homeless people choose to be homeless. That is not true. A study out of Denver recently showed that when homeless people were offered supportive housing, 90% accepted it. Our 2024 point in time count found that in Santa Cruz, people are most often becoming homeless after being evicted from housing or losing a job. Another myth is that most homeless people don't want to work. They don't want a job. Not true. In fact, 26% of unhoused people in Santa Cruz County have some form of employment. Another myth is that it's impossible to solve the issue of homelessness because it is just too expensive. Not true. Studies show that the cost of not effectively addressing homelessness is far greater than the cost of providing housing. This study out of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte tracked chronically homeless adults, and the study found that housing people led to dramatic cost savings that more than paid for the cost of putting them in decent housing, including 1.8 million in healthcare savings, 372 fewer hospital days, and once housed, people previously homeless spent 84 fewer days in jail. and there was a 72% drop in arrests. So think about that. Not only is it not too expensive to address this problem, it is too expensive not to. And that brings us to an issue that is very close to my heart as the county public defender. One thing that is not a myth, one thing that is true, is that unhoused people are disproportionately involved in the criminal legal system. 24% of our point-in-time count respondents said they'd spent time in jail, prison, or the juvenile hall in the past year. 16% said they were on probation or parole at the start of their most recent episode of homelessness. So in my experience working with this population over 20 years as a public defender, with a lot of that time in Santa Cruz, I see a mix of things driving these high numbers. Many of the same things that lead to homelessness lead to criminal system involvement. Histories of trauma, parents or caregivers who are system involved, involvement in the foster care system, racism, poverty, mental health and substance use disorders. These forces impact people across all aspects of their lives, leading to a cascade of challenges. There is also this vicious cycle going on here. Unhoused people are more likely to become system involved as homelessness becomes increasingly criminalized. And at the same time, system involved people are more likely to become homeless because of the incredibly destabilizing effect that system involvement has on their families, communities, and lives. And people with criminal records find it much harder to secure housing, employment, education, and loans, and they suffer an intense social stigma that can lead to instability, isolation, and even suicide. What does it mean to criminalize homelessness? What are we talking about on the most basic level? It's a few things. It's the act of making it a crime to live without a house, to camp or to sleep on the streets, to store belongings in a cart or a tent, to loiter, to panhandle, all the things that unhoused people do simply to exist. At another level that is less talked about is it's prosecuting people for the root causes of homelessness. Issues related to mental health and substance use disorders, to taking shelter or making a fire to stay warm. In Santa Cruz County, we do all of that. And the question that we have to grapple with as a community is whether it makes sense to punish unhoused people for what are arguably systemic failures, failures of education, failures of social systems, failures of public health, and the byproducts of racism and classism. These are functions of a society where the gap between rich and poor is ever widening in a county that is one of the most expensive places to live in the world. Is it fair? Is it good policy? Is it even legal? These are tough questions without easy answers. Let's start with the question of whether it is legal to criminalize homelessness. In this landmark case, Martin versus City of Boise, decided by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2018, the court considered a lawsuit brought by about a half dozen homeless people who were cited for camping on public property in Boise, Idaho. And the court said it is unconstitutional to punish people for sleeping when there aren't enough shelter beds or housing available as alternatives. Santa Cruz, like many other places, historically relied on anti-camping ordinances to police how and where unhoused people were living on the streets. Law enforcement officers would roll them up and move them along at will without offering permanent solutions and sometimes putting them in jail. The law after Martin versus City of Boise was that places like Santa Cruz County that don't have anywhere near enough shelter beds or housing to offer unhoused people couldn't do that anymore. It was illegal. And I wish that was where this story ends. It is not. Just this summer, on June 28, 2024, the US Supreme Court overturned Martin versus Boise and City of Grants Pass versus Johnson. So this is a case that started in Grants Pass, Oregon, when the city began issuing tickets to people sleeping in public with minimal protection like a blanket, even when there were no shelter beds. After the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the unhoused plaintiffs and found that the city's ordinance was unconstitutional, Grants Pass appealed to the US Supreme Court. This is how we ended up where we are now. The US Supreme Court issued a 6-3 decision in City of Grants Pass, holding that the municipality's enforcement of an ordinance banning camping on public property against individuals experiencing homelessness does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. And this decision is a huge blow for our unhoused neighbors. As is often the case, when the prior case was decided, Martin versus City of Boise, politicians, lawmakers, and activists started looking for ways to get around it. It should come as no surprise to those of you who are from North Santa Cruz that there are powerful, affluent, and wealthy voters who don't want to see people living on the streets or in encampments on the river or in parks and public spaces. So in Santa Cruz, even after City of Boise, we still had and have anti-camping ordinances. They're just tailored to get around City of Boise. They aim not at the camping in its broadest sense, but instead on how, when, and where it's done. So an example of a law like this is Santa Cruz Municipal Code 6.36.040. It prohibits overnight encampments when there is an available overnight sanctioned sleeping location or a 24/7 sanctioned sheltering location. And it prohibits daytime encampments when there's an available 24/7 sanctioned sheltering location or available homeless person storage. So as long as the city provides a place for homeless people to store their things during the day, regardless of whether that is practical, feasible, or possible for people to use that storage, people can't camp during the day. So together, these laws criminalize living in any sort of semi-permanent encampment that can't be swept away at sunrise. The city of Santa Cruz has said it won't change its policies to become harsher after the Grants Pass decision, that people experiencing homelessness report they're experiencing more police contact, more aggressive law enforcement, and a feeling that they are just being endlessly shuffled around, constantly losing the places they consider home, their belongings, their community connections, and their sense of stability. Additionally, Santa Cruz recently proposed a new ordinance to criminalize the unsanctioned transport of homeless individuals into the city by outside government entities. The proposal aims to stop other jurisdictions
Heather, did we lose you?
Looks like we might have lost Heather. Let's see if we can get her back. Well, as we wait for Heather to come back, if everybody just wants to take a couple minutes, refill your coffee, grab another glass of water, take a bio break, and hopefully we'll get the technical difficulties all ironed out and be able to resume in a couple of minutes. But appreciate your patience while we figure out all the technicalities of this world.
Okay. So
For folks who just joined us, we're having a couple of technical difficulties, so we're trying to get our presenter back on the line. So just hold tight and hopefully we'll be able to get her back in a couple seconds. Thanks. Heather is in the waiting room and I just admitted her, connecting to audio. Hey, Heather, are you with us? Can you hear me? I cannot hear you. It looks like you're muted.
hi, everyone. So sorry. For some reason, my county internet just flashed out, but I got into a public, I have some public internet that we can try instead. So let me go ahead and reshare my slide. Can everyone see that?
Yep, it's coming through.
Okay, fantastic. So what we were talking about is, really how all of these laws work together to make it really difficult for homeless people, simply to exist. And they give law enforcement officers and prosecutors a lot of different hooks for citing, charging, convicting, and incarcerating homeless people who are seen by some community members as a nuisance. And so for me, this is really, the sort of the, incarceration issue that we see here is that it's not per se the homelessness that law enforcement targets, it's everything that leads to it and everything that flows from it. So as a public defender, our team here is really on the front lines of this crisis. I started this presentation talking about this woman I represented who was charged with first-degree burglary because she showered in a house that was under construction because she'd been sexually assaulted and was afraid to keep living on the streets. Unfortunately, that case is not an outlier at all. My homeless clients suffering from mental health disorders get arrested for all kinds of things. Classic example we see almost every day in our courtroom is an outburst that's charged as a criminal threat, which is another strike felony. When people suffering from a mental health crisis are arrested, they often end up resisting officers. That adds a felony resisting an executive officer charge to their legal problems. And if a homeless person breaks a window to say, get into an unoccupied building like a shed to warm up or have a safe place to sleep, that can lead to a felony vandalism charge. They try to sleep on private property, that's trespassing. If they build a fire to warm up, that's arson. And these cases get very complicated and very serious very quickly. So less serious, but equally troubling are the sweeps carried out on our clients who are living in their cars or motorhomes because they have nowhere else to go. So when an officer sees an expired registration tag or illegal parking, they issue citations and tow the homes away. These clients end up on the street where they get additional citations for illegal camping, open container, or an unleashed dog. And before you know it, they have hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in unpaid fines, bench warrants, and convictions. And then there are the citations and the criminal cases that arise from leveling and destroying encampments. Even before, when it was unlawful to ticket people simply for sleeping when there were no shelters available, the bulldozing of encampments inevitably led to criminal citation for things like resisting an arrest, resisting an executive officer, assault or battery on an officer, and other crimes related to people's human response to being forcibly evicted from the only homes they know and having their property jeopardized and destroyed. So as the public defender, I was appointed on a platform of reducing incarceration, reducing recidivism, and offering real solutions to the root causes of system involvement. So I thought a lot about the role we would play under these conditions and how our agency could be part of a solution rather than this persistent problem. And before I shift into talking about my office, why don't we just make time for a few questions and thoughts about what I've talked about so far? I'm going to transition now into our model of defense and what we're up to. But if anybody has something burning they'd like to share or ask about what we've talked about so far, let's take a brief pause for that.
Thanks, Heather. And I'm not seeing any questions in the chat so far. But if folks do have questions, feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute and take up some space.
Hello.
I'll give it a minute. We've talked about a lot of things.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I was wondering, what is the legality surrounding the posted times for raids and the officers having to follow those postings, because they have postings outside of Coral Street that they've been raiding, that basically it's every Monday and Wednesday they do street sweeps of everyone that's living there from 9 to 1 or from 9 to 12. But then because me and other activists have been showing up, filming them and telling them that they have to follow storage laws and that they have to give people stuff back if they show up and say that it's theirs, they've started showing up at off times now. So they're not showing up at the times that are posted. And we've got word from people on the ground that they're going to be showing up tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Wow.
So I was just wondering what the legalities are with them showing up at times that are not posted.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the answer. It's a great question. My specialty, of course, is criminal law and public defense. I don't know if it's a crime for the officers to do that, if it's a civil offense, maybe it violates regulations or county municipal codes. I think it's a really, really good question, Emmanuel, and I'm sorry I don't know the answer. But I'm glad you're out there, keeping an eye on it for sure. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. I'm going to move into the next part of the presentation then. So when I was appointed and I looked around and saw what people were experiencing, the people that we represented, people like the young woman I told you about, I thought a lot about the many equity, public health, and legal issues that our clients were facing. And the story that kept coming to mind for me was a story told by the late anti-apartheid and human rights activist, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the story, which many of you have probably heard, is about a group of picnickers who are on a riverbank. And they see a man drowning in the river and they rush in to save him, as any of us would do. And just as they're dragging that person onto the beach, they see 2 more people drowning. And then there are 4 people, 8 people, 16 people. The rescuers scream for help. And before you know it, everyone from the riverbank is out there in the river and they've linked hands in a human chain trying to save the people who are drowning. And suddenly, one of the rescuers breaks away from the group and walks away. They walk up the river. And the others yell at them, "Where are you going? These people are drowning. These people are dying." And the person who walks away looks back at all these people out there in the river and says, "This isn't working. We have to go upstream to see why these people are falling in." So as a frontline defender, working in the trenches of the criminal legal system for nearly 20 years, I can tell you that I have spent most of my career out there in that river, linked arms with my fellows, trying to save folks as they were drowning, and many of them were slipping by. This human chain doesn't work for us. It hasn't worked for us, and it's not working for our clients. Many of the people that we represent are suffering from mental health and substance use disorders, homelessness, hopelessness, and generational trauma. And what that means is that we can't solve the problem simply by standing out there in the river. We have to go upstream to find out why people are falling in. We can't litigate, incarcerate, or prosecute our way out of homelessness. It is never going to work. So what our office has done is adopted a new model of public defense that is designed to offer real solutions to these problems. Whenever possible, we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive so that we can help our clients lift themselves up and out of this river. And we are trying to shape conversations and narratives to persuade other stakeholders that mass incarceration is not a solution to homelessness. This is our model. We call it community-based whole person defense. I think it's a really common sense way to be a public defender. Others think it's really pushing the envelope. To me, this is just what client-centered defense looks like. Zealous advocacy, holistic representation, and community engagement. We have interdisciplinary defense teams to defend our clients that have social workers, advocates, investigators, and attorneys working together to address legal needs and social needs, which are always interrelated. We're upstream, assessing and addressing root causes, working with partners to find solutions to those. And we rely heavily on community-based resources, efforts aimed at rehabilitation, and efforts aimed at reentry. This is kind of a flow chart of what it would look like if you were represented by our office. We would try to get you a defender as soon as possible, as close to law enforcement contact as possible. We would then do a holistic intake that looks at things like whether you're housed, whether you're job insecure, housing insecure, your immigration status, whether you have children and dependents, whether you're suffering from mental health or substance use disorder. If you're incarcerated, we engage in release advocacy. We try to get everyone out of jail. We then cobble together that interdisciplinary defense team that includes social workers, advocates, anything that you need for us to help you reach your goals. You meet with an attorney. We talk about your goals. We make a plan to reach them. We do whatever it takes to do that: investigation, mitigation, collaboration. And we're always looking creatively at ways to resolve a criminal case that leads to as minimal criminal legal system involvement as possible. Dismissal, diversion, pleas, trials, collaborative courts. We try to do the best that we can for folks. And we look at that with an eye to coming up with resolutions that meet our clients' goals. Once the case goes through the system, we start talking to our clients about reentry. And when a certain amount of time has passed, we're there to do record clearance, to try to get records cleared up so that people can knit back together their lives. So another example from a real case of what holistic defense looks like is our representation of a woman I'll call Anna. Anna was a single mother. She was arrested after her ex-boyfriend accused her of domestic violence, and she was charged with a felony. She was facing a serious jail sentence, maybe even prison. So our client advocate visited Anna at the jail on a Friday afternoon, knowing that a judge wouldn't see her until at least after the weekend, maybe not even Monday, maybe Tuesday. Anna didn't have money to post bail. Anna was housing insecure, and she proudly had just secured shelter at the family shelter with her 2 young children. She was the sole provider and caregiver for these kids, and she was frantic. What's going to happen to my housing? What's going to happen to my kids? You've got to get me out of here. Our advocate called the shelter to secure Anna's housing, called Anna's sister to care for her kids while we worked to get Anna home. And our advocate worked with an attorney and a social worker to put together a release plan that persuaded the judge to let Anna out when she went to court a few days later. Of course, that was just the start of so many other challenges for Anna. Our defense team helped her successfully navigate a Child Protective Services investigation, connect with supportive services, and maintain housing. Our investigator investigated the DV charge and found evidence that Anna's ex-boyfriend was lying about the domestic violence because he was jealous and angry that she had left him. When our attorney gave this evidence of innocence to the prosecutor dismissed Anna's case in the interest of justice. And so Anna is now stable, housed, and raising her children. And I believe that our defense model is a primary reason for why that is so. It is not enough to just look at the elements of a charge, to walk into court, ready to say things. We have to be partnering with our clients and community to look at the bigger problems, the bigger issues, and help them solve them. So Anna is just one of thousands of clients that we've helped here at Public Defenders, where we handle between 6,000 and 10,000 cases a year, representing people like Anna. So this pie chart shows the types of advocacy our client advocates and social workers and defenders provided during the last fiscal year. This was July 1st, 2022 to July 1st, 2023, the first year our county public defender's office was in business. And what I think this pie chart shows is that we work in the emergency room of the criminal legal system. Our clients have complex and urgent needs. A typical client may be homeless, experiencing poverty, and suffering from a mental health and substance use disorder. And this pie is a visual representation of the needs we see in this community every time we walk down the street. The biggest areas of need are mental health and substance use advocacy and housing advocacy, right? We know this is what people need. So our early representation project is one way that we're trying to, help people address housing and stay in their housing. So through early representation, we give people struggling with poverty the same access to justice as people with means. So people like Anna no longer have to wait days, weeks, or months to have a public defender appointed. Instead, we get a list of everyone who's been incarcerated for more than 24 hours without defense, and we get someone in there to talk to those people right then, so that we can start to shore up the things that we know help people get back on their feet when they leave carceral settings. Early representation promotes justice in really incalculable ways. And so our advocates met with 302 people during that first year. 14% were unhoused. And many of our early rep clients belong to groups that have been historically oppressed and continue to bear the brunt of mass incarceration, including people of color. So in 2021, sadly, Santa Cruz County had the 8th highest arrest rate of Black people among all counties in California. Last year, Black people made up 8% of our early rep clients, but only 1.5% of the population of Santa Cruz County. And Latinx clients made up 37.6% of our early rep clients, but only 34.5% of our population. And so what we're seeing is that in Santa Cruz, as elsewhere across the nation, the carceral system falls heaviest on people of color. So one way we can help people avoid additional criminal legal system involvement when they get one of those citations or a criminal notice to appear for all of those different things that flow from the experience of being unhoused is through restorative justice. So for us, one of the things that we look for when we screen a case during early rep or frankly any other time is whether we can keep it out of the system. The neighborhood courts program is one way we can do that. It's a community-driven pre-filing diversion program designed to divert low-level misdemeanors. And so the idea here is that first-time offenders have an opportunity to take responsibility for what they've done and work in a community type setting to really ameliorate whatever that is and reach agreements to do something besides be involved in the criminal legal system. So this is one way that we're trying to keep people out of the system. Our juvenile justice team is busy. We represent all children accused of delinquency in juvenile justice court. And what we know from the point in time count and other research is that children experiencing homelessness or living in families that are housing insecure are much more likely to end up charged as children with crimes. So I am very happy that for the first time ever, our juvenile practice now has a social worker who's assigned to every child who's detained. And we're also supporting the expansion of the court-appointed special advocate program to include children who are charged in juvenile justice court. I cannot say strongly enough that cages are not for children. Care is the much better solution. And our goal is to decarcerate children completely, to get them well and to get them home. We also staff a 24-hour phone we call the BAT phone. So if a child is detained on a serious charge after hours or on the weekend, we're notified and show up within 2 hours to begin representation. We staff all these specialty courts, supporting the courts and our partners in trying to lift people up and out of the system. Many of these courts are pre-plea courts, so we can try to, get someone out of the system without a plea to a crime. Others are supportive courts that come after somebody is convicted with the idea that if they complete the court, they can have that conviction dismissed or expunged. In our Truth Project, we try to advise our clients of the true penalties of criminal convictions, which include potentially devastating impacts on housing. And as part of our holistic defense model, we think really critically about reentry. So we provide our clients with resources for record clearance, post-conviction relief, immigration advocacy, case management, and supportive referrals. Our Clean Slate Project filed nearly 1,000 record clearance motions last year with a 95% success rate. And with our post-conviction relief work, we're shortening prison sentences, assessing old cases for racial justice issues, and doing everything possible to help people get out of jail. We're also collaborating with partners to work on providing reentry services to incarcerated clients 90 days before they're released. So my dream is that clients will have a reentry outtake similar to our holistic intake every time they leave a carceral setting. And with that information, we could support clients as they work to shore up their lives with housing, employment, treatment, and community supports. I also dream of providing defender peer navigators for clients reentering their community. And we're working with county and community partners to urge the jail to provide all incarcerated caregivers and parents with contact visits with their children. We know this strengthens families, it improves outcomes, including reducing recidivism and breaking cycles of incarceration. And it also simply responds to what is the very basic human right to maintain a bond with your child. We dream of supporting a nonprofit partner to help us meet urgent material needs that are outside our budget, such as hotel vouchers when we need a few days to get someone into a program, sleeping bags and tents, shoes for clients who leave the jail without them and stumble into our office not knowing where else to go, clothes for job interviews, Uber and Lyft rides for people trying to get to housing or other services, and just 100 other things our clients need for successful reentry that we can't currently provide. So what can folks who are experiencing homelessness do to avoid and navigate law enforcement contact? Stay informed about local laws. The laws regulating loitering, sleeping in public places and cars, parking and such vary throughout our county from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So the city of Santa Cruz may have different laws than the county of Santa Cruz, which might have different laws than Capitola or Scotts Valley. Shelters and services sometimes provide a way for people experiencing homelessness to stay out of harm's way and to stay out of the sights of law enforcement. Not always. In our community, 211 can be a resource for people to reach out and find out what's available in terms of shelter and services. Of course, as we all know, every single shelter and service in this county has a wait list. There are no true emergency shelters. We are bursting at the seams with people who need help, and there are not enough beds to house all the people who want housing. Building relationships with outreach workers and activists is a good idea. This can improve access to resources, and it can also flag situations where law enforcement is acting in a way that's unlawful. Stay connected. If possible, having a phone or some way to stay in touch with support networks is a good way to stay safe, to have people keeping an eye on you. You know, I think that law enforcement behaves better when folks are watching, and having a supportive community is critical for that. Know your rights. Protection from unlawful searches and seizures. That's a Fourth Amendment right. The right to due process if somebody is arrested or cited or hauled into court. The right to not be discriminated against, equal protection, to not be discriminated against just for the status of being unhoused. The right to have equal access to available services, and the right to privacy, which is enshrined in human rights law. It's enshrined in international law that we have signed on to. But I think those of us who work in this space know that so many of these rights, while people technically have them, folks turn a blind eye when they're violated. And so we all need to work together to make sure that isn't so. Get early representation if you get a citation for a criminal conviction. In July of 2023, we rolled out an out-of-custody early representation project. Our project was a partnership between Watsonville Police Department and us. Officers hand out these cards when they hand out citations at booking or when they hand out a notice to appear. And so our defenders have the ability then to meet with clients before their first court dates. We try to figure out what led to the arrest. We try to provide supportive services. We look at the lawfulness of the arrest. So a typical client might have received a citation for drunken public or a family dispute. And we get to work right away linking clients to supportive services so that we can try to off-ramp people out of the system or at least be prepared to fight the criminal charge when we get to court. So here are some things that I want to keep talking about. I see this really as the start of a big conversation. I want to talk about decriminalizing homelessness in Santa Cruz County, about investing in housing, supportive housing, and treatment rather than citations, convictions, and incarceration. How can we as a community work upstream to address root causes to avoid downstream consequences like criminal legal system involvement? We need funding and support for robust reentry that links incarcerated people to benefits, housing, treatment, and employment resources before they're released. We need to be talking about a homeless court. In cases where criminal system involvement is inevitable, we could invest like a court they have in San Diego County. The San Diego County Homeless Court Program is a special court session that helps homeless individuals resolve outstanding misdemeanor offenses, traffic violations, and warrants. It's voluntary. It is an alternative to traditional court, and it recognizes the efforts participants make to engage in services. It offers life skills classes, substance abuse meetings, job training, medical care, and housing navigation. And when folks engage in these services, the court can, expunge, dismiss, or get rid of the criminal convictions altogether. Universal eviction defense and defense for people in a housing crisis. We need to talk about a universal right to counsel in eviction cases and landlord-tenant issues that might be resolved through mediation. In November of 2018, San Francisco voters passed Prop F, the tenant right to counsel, and it guaranteed tenants a right to counsel in all eviction matters. So traditionally, landlords were represented by attorneys at a rate of 6-to-1 as compared to tenants, even though studies show that having an attorney in an eviction case increases a family's chance of avoiding homelessness by over 70%. And so this is a way to keep people in housing. Another promising model is Heartland Center in Kansas City. In their first 15 months, they represented almost 2,000 tenants, keeping 86% housed with no eviction record. And Santa Cruz County has an eviction collaborative that needs more support and funding to do the similar work that they are doing to keep people housed. Finally, I know that we're stronger together, that we have to continue sharing, learning, connecting, and collaborating. Our defenders engage in extensive outreach and collaboration throughout our community. We're always willing to speak with groups like this about what we do and to share information about services available to all community members, like the record clearance services we offer in Clean Slate. We are really, truly committed to building strong relationships so that we can learn together and do better for this community. I see public defense as a social justice movement, and it's something that affects us here in our community. It affects us regionally, it affects us statewide, it affects us nationally. And by working together to solve these common problems, I think a rising tide lifts all ships and we can just do better work. I'm going to end with the words of Martin Luther King, written from inside the Birmingham jail in 1963 as he fought for justice. These words continue to drive our work as public defenders. They remind us that we still have a lot to do to achieve equity, to provide equal justice for all, including our brothers, sisters, friends, and neighbors who are unhoused. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And so I invite you to join our office, to join my defenders as we fight for justice here in Santa Cruz County. And with that, I'm going to leave information here. This includes our general mailbox, our early rep mailbox, our Clean Slate mailbox. I'll leave this up for a minute. But I'm also going to take this down in a minute so I can see more of you as we hopefully have a conversation and talk about some of the things that we raised here today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Heather. if folks want to share some love and appreciation in the chat or do a little reaction, but just really want to take a moment to thank you for sharing all this wonderful information with us. And yeah, we'll open it up for questions. I'm not seeing any in the chat, but if folks have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, raise your hand, or just come off mute and share your question with us.
Oh, hello. I can also go next if someone else wants to ask first, because I don't want to take up too much space.
No, go for it.
Okay, so basically, on the fact that we were there at Coral, we were also there during Pogonip during when the raids were there. Also, hi Heather, I met you at the conference with Don Lane and them. That was
Yes,
that
I
was a
remember
very
you.
yeah, it was very interesting to say the least. But I very much appreciate what you have to say all the time.
Thank you.
So I was very much aware that shelters do not have space on and that they have wait lists. I used to work at Housing Matters, so I know. The thing is that when we were at the when we were at the raids in Pogonip, the police officers told us that they were handing out housing vouchers. And I knew that that was complete horseshit because I haven't seen a new housing voucher get offered by the Housing Authority in Santa Cruz since September of 2022. So,
Right.
so unless if they like, I don't know. But then I asked the social service people that were there that day if they were handing out vouchers, and they said no. What are they talking about? So, and then when we asked if we could take a look at the paper that they were handing them, it was like a red piece of paper, and they said that it was like not, it was like a voucher for some shelter or whatever, but I was like, oh, they said for the city overlook shelter. But I know that that one was also severely impacted, like they all are. And I was just like wondering if you guys know anything about whether or not like those people actually got sheltered there, or if they're just walking around and got arrested and are now with you guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. So, kind of what I tried to touch on a little bit earlier, most of the people that we represent are charged with crimes that stem from the experience of homelessness, but are not, simply camping on the street, right? Breathing and sleeping on the street. So it's difficult to say what's going on there. I agree with you that a true housing voucher, that's not a thing that we're seeing people get. Sometimes there are shelter beds, especially at the more remote, unpopular shelters, right, where people aren't close to services. Maybe they can't take their dogs or their belongings. Maybe it's not a housing first model, and so folks suffering from substance use disorders can't simply just stop that and sign up at a shelter, right? So there's a lot of reasons why shelters aren't working for my clients. I can't say specifically that I know what's happening at Coral Street because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a housing expert. My teams are here in the courtrooms and jails every day defending people accused of crimes. But I'm not particularly surprised by what you're telling me, Emmanuel. And I think this is a good space for us to share information, even if none of us have the answers. It's good to just be sharing our experience, talking about it, and elevating the issue, because there might be folks in this virtual room who can work on this with you, right? So I wish I had an answer for you. It's a great question. Jessica?
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Heather. This has been incredible, just to really dig into what your office does, and it is so mind-blowing, all of the work you're doing and all of the amazing pieces being pulled together. So thank you and your team. It's truly amazing. I wanted to ask regarding kind of a specific issue that is really impacting persons who are unhoused and getting housed and in getting subsidies. And and what you're, and so I'm talking about persons who are registered sex offenders, registered 290s. And unfortunately, the housing programs really struggle with how to identify housing that they can attain, how to, you know, folks have been really creative about finding subsidy solutions, but also just kind of the basics of understanding what restrictions there are for each person, because our understanding is it's very individualized regarding each person's situation. And then also I saw something on one of your slides, and so I'm wondering, you know, when folks can get support in trying to get rid of that designation, and just really how programs can empower themselves to find out truly how they can support people, where they can live, all of those things. So that was a big question, so sorry.
Oh, it's such an important question. And, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, the myths about people who are homeless. I could do a whole nother presentation on the myths about people who are registered sex offenders under Penal Code Section 290. I mean, that could be something as simple as you are in a traffic jam and you exit the car and urinate on the side of the road, right? And so what we have seen over my career is a real misuse of crimes that involve registration to scoop up just an incredible diverse array of people who have engaged, some of them in behaviors that your average person just is not thinking that's a sex offense, right? And so it's very troubling to me. Recently, the legislators rolled out a tiered model that looked a little bit more, you know, sort of probingly at the different things that led to sex offender registration. It's a 3-tiered system, and many of those crimes now that fall into the tiers can lead to getting off the sex offender list, right? We can help you with termination. So first, I put a link in the chat to our Clean Slate program. That is something we do. That's what you saw in my reentry slide. We assess folks' complete criminal record, including PC 290 registrable offenses. And one of the things we look for is how to terminate registration. Now, on the question of housing and sex offender registration, I can only speak to that really from my work at the Housing for Health Partnership Policy Board, you know, where I'm on the review committee to look at all the continuum of care proposals. And, you know, some of them are really pitched at serving that population in particular, which is great. But in terms of the different types of registrations and whether people can live within a certain, you know, square footage of a school or a hospital or a park, it is incredibly complicated, and it really is case specific. It depends on the tier. It depends on, you know, whether people have gone through that process of having a sex offender registration terminated. So we're happy to help look at the determination issue. We can do that at cleanslate@santacruzcountyca.gov. We're not civil attorneys, we're not housing attorneys, so it's difficult for us to like look at a situation and say, this is the kind of housing this person needs. I wish that there was a service like that. It seems to me that our housing CBOs are going to be doing a better job of that than I would.
Thank
Did that
you.
answer the question, Jessica?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah, and it did. And definitely we'll be referring folks to you all and kind of brainstorming on how to answer the last question regarding the specifics, because we kind of get a runaround about you should ask this person or this person. So we'll see what we can do to come up with it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great to just have, I don't know, like a flow chart or some kind of a simple way that we could understand it? Yeah, we need to understand it better. That's for sure. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions, thoughts, anything to share around these issues?
Lift up a question from the chat. Question was, with respect to record clearance / clean slate, does your office or any organizations in our region provide similar support with civil records, debit / credit reports, eviction, etc.?
Oh my gosh, what a great question, Julian. I've never heard of a nonprofit doing that. It doesn't mean it's not happening. I'm happy to look into it. I don't know the answer, and I don't know what the rules are around expunging those records, or if it's even possible to do that. I think it would be great, because as anyone who's ever tried to get a house knows, if you have an eviction on your record, it is really, really tough to get into housing. This might also be something that we can lift up to our legislators, right? Sort of a clean slate law for civil types of proceedings would be great if there isn't one already. And again, I'm not a civil lawyer. I've never practiced civilly. So if you get into trouble, I'm really a great person to call on some of these other issues. They're just beyond my expertise.
Had just a couple of questions around if
Sure.
slides would be shared from the presentation. And yes, we'll be sending out those slides via email later this week. And then we're also going to be posting a recording of the presentation to the Housing for Health Partnership website in the next week or so too. And then somebody asked about transcripts. So I'm not 100% sure about transcripts, but I'm going to look into it, and hopefully we can also post the transcripts as well.
Great. Of course, I saw typos in my presentation, which I'll fix before I send out the slides. That's the problem with being neurotic and working on presentations up until the last minute. So my apologies for that. Any other questions, thoughts? Emmanuel?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I did a little fact checking and I reached out to some people. It was actually reported that they were going to be in Pogonip tomorrow, not at Coral Street. Sorry about that.
Oh,
Don't mean to
okay.
misinform.
No, that's really good to know. That's really good to know. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
Okay.
Mhm.
Are we, maybe a lot of folks are just kind of, oh, Beth.
Hi. As I'm listening in, and part of the, the plea for having organizations that can be part of, part of the supportive reintegration back into society, I was really curious to see who would be here, not just Heather, but also in the audience, and what agencies they come from, or where their interests are. And I still don't know. I can drop my information in there, but I am with the Nurse Family Partnership at Santa Cruz County, and we take first-time moms, and we have taken, many that are involved in the criminal justice system as they come out of jail. They sometimes find out they're pregnant when they're in jail, often substance use disorder. And we want to be there. We want to be part of this, to be supporting anyone that fits the criteria for our program, which is very limited and niche, but we take any first-time parents or pregnant people up until 28 weeks. And hopefully we're going to get that changed up until they're ready to deliver. And then we can stay with them, partnered with a public health nurse for a couple of years. And I'm just really curious who else is here, and, what your roles are out there in the world.
Oh, it's such a great question. And Beth, I don't know if you've connected at all with our Director of Holistic Defense, Caitlin Becker.
Caitlin Becker?
Yeah.
I don't know that
services that
name.
you're providing, it really sounds like something we should know about. If you wouldn't mind just doing a private message with your email, I would love to get connected and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just drop it in the chat, so anybody that's interested. Yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. And I love your idea of hearing where folks are from. So there is a lot going on here.
Oh, and people are putting in who they are. Awesome. Thank you.
Housing Navigator, Reentry Program Coordinator, COE,
Oh, that's great. Thank you,
City
everybody.
Overlook Shelter. Wonderful. This is great. Thank you all for coming. And please chime in if you want to add anything to what I've said. Again, I imagine many of you have far more expertise in this area than I do. Amazing. Look at that.
Awesome. While we're
Oh.
seeing those pop in, are there any other final questions for today before we move into closing out? Alrighty. Well, I do want to just say that there is a feedback survey link in the chat. I'm happy to put that in the chat once again. If everybody can please take 3 minutes of your time to complete this feedback survey, it would be very helpful to us to just plan and engage on how we can continue to provide opportunities for learning to better serve our unhoused population. And I do want to just say a special thank you to you, Heather, for taking time to be here with us today. Really thorough and well put together presentation. I personally took like 4 pages of notes. There was so much, I think, about the legal system that I wasn't aware of that I'm learning more and more about. So I am really grateful. I think we're all really grateful for the information you provided. And also to everybody in the audience, thank you for taking the time to be here today and share these learnings with us. And hopefully take all of this information back into your work and together create a more holistic system of support for our unhoused folks.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciated the invite, and it was my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And Alex, I do see some people mentioning that the link is not working. So maybe we can also send it in a follow-up email with the slides. Would that be all right?
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We hope you have a good rest of your evening, and you will hopefully receive a follow-up email from us to share out all this great information.
Wonderful. Thanks to all. Looking forward to continuing to connect.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.